I'm Jack, Sam's brother, and we are here in our backyard where we also live with our other brother. And Sam wanted to give some advice about how to have an impact on the world. And since he couldn't interview himself, here I am. So, Sam, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, to get started, I think one of the things that people talk a lot about is how to get things done once you're working on. But I know you spend a lot of time thinking about sort of what to work on. So, could you talk a little bit about how to pick what's important to work on?
Yeah, I think you want to look for the intersection of what you're good at, what you enjoy, and where you can create value for the world. And in my experience, if you don't find something at the intersection of those three, it's hard to really have an impact. I think most people kind of just fall into what they work on. They don't give it much thought, and there is benefit to that. Sometimes you actually have to just try stuff to figure out what you like. But I really do think it is worth upfront thought about what you're going to spend most of your waking time doing. So I think it's really good when people think about what they're good at, what they like, and kind of how they can create value for the world.
And in terms of how to actually get things done, so you've selected what to work on, who to work on it with, you think maybe you found your tribe, and then kind of now what? What are sort of the best ways to actually accomplish big things?
Well, there's a Charlie Rose quote on this that I've always loved, and I've since added one more element to it. But the quote is that the way things get done in the world are through a combination of focus and personal connection. And the additional point I would make, after having thought about it for a while, is that the third factor is self-belief. You really have to have a deep-seated personal conviction that this thing you're going to do, that a lot of people say is really stupid, is going to work and going to be important. But I think those three things, focus, personal connections, and self-belief, in my experience, are how things get done in the world.
So since you were, as long as, you've grown up, and certainly through your 20s and now, you've worked incredibly hard, and I know that a lot of the people around you have worked very hard. What's sort of the advice or the way that you think about your work-life balance in your 20s, and what do you recommend to people who want to do these things and also want to, experience their 20s?
I do think that working hard early in your career to get the leverage and the compounding effects is underrated and one of the most valuable pieces of advice that I never got.
And so going into that idea of these early years being particularly valuable and working very hard on things, how do you decide when you've worked on something long enough and it's time to call it quits, or when you've worked on it for 4 years and you're just about to have that breakthrough? How do you make that distinction?
The best entrepreneurs I know, they make an internal decision about when to give up or when to keep working on something. It's basically when you have run out of ideas and something is not working, then it's a good time to stop.
And so into this idea that you need a long time to do anything important, what's the source of motivation for people? Like, what should people be looking to find to be inspired or to keep going on these ideas for a long period of time?
I think if you don't actually believe what you're doing is really important, if you don't derive satisfaction from what you're doing, then you will not be able to sustain all of the bad things that happen in the incredibly long period of time that the bad things happen over. And so the only motivation that I have seen work for people over a long period of time is enjoyment in what they're doing and an intense belief that it matters, and ideally liking the people that they go to work with every day. But I think the reasons that a lot of people, and by the way, it's totally cool when people start off saying, well, I want to make money or I want to be famous. I think a lot of people start that way and they don't like to admit it. But pretty quickly, or at least in the first few years, I think a lot of people find a deeper mission for why they do what they do, and that drives them then for the rest of the time they work.
And the final question is, if you could leave young people who want to have a big impact with one or two pieces of advice, what would you tell them?
Well, I don't want to give people a specific field to go work on, because I think the whole idea is that people need to figure out themselves what they believe in and what they think and what they believe is high impact to work on for the future. So what I will say instead is it is really important to actually think hard about where you think you can make the biggest contribution that you're good at and the world needs and that you enjoy, and then go meet people to work with, go learn as much about that field as you can, and then have the courage of your convictions to actually take a risk and focus on it and go do something there, and that it's okay if you fail. And if you do fail, you'll not be in much different of a place than you are today, and you can go try the next thing. But I think really important to be willing to go take a risk and make some amount of sacrifice to be able to try to impact the world in some way that you really care about. And I think the sooner you get to work on that, the better you'll be.
Awesome. All right, well, Sam, thanks very much.
Thank you.